I'm Pamela Spence, EY's Health Sciences and Wellness Leader, and I'm joined today with Dr. Lihan, who has got a fascinating role in leading the company Mirxes. So, Lihan, before we get going in terms of some of the more detailed questions, perhaps you could tell us a bit more about Mirxes and what the company really sets out to achieve.
Thank you for having me. So I founded Mirxes with two of my co-founders 9 years ago with a mission to develop a new class of blood test that can detect cancer early when the cancer patient is asymptomatic. So our goal really is to use RNA and PCR technologies to develop a new set of blood tests to save lives and to save costs.
Thank you. And why do you think the shift to preventative medicine is so important for us?
Now, for a couple of reasons. If you asked me 10 years ago before we founded the company, I would say, let's wait for the magic pill to cure cancer. Right? And we did indeed had a lot of advance in cancer therapy, whether it's targeted therapy, immunotherapy, cell and gene therapy. But what we have realized in the past 10 years is if we continue to diagnose patients late, regardless of how advanced our treatment is, the endpoint is still the same. So patients continue to die. But in countries where cancers are diagnosed early, that's where the combination of more advanced therapy and earlier diagnosis has resulted in tremendous improvement in patient survival and at the same time actually lower the cost of healthcare.
I think I will come back to your cost comment in a minute, because I'm a big believer in how can we collectively as an industry really work together to make healthcare more affordable. But let's just go back to the prevention aspect. I've been speaking to many companies for a while now about the opportunity that healthcare has to move to prevent and cure, rather than really what we have mainstream today as manage and treat. And I'm fascinated, obviously doing a bit of reading about you and Mirxes. I hear you talking about the discipline it needs, or we need as individuals, to take early diagnosis tests. Could you talk a bit more about what you mean by discipline?
Certainly. Now, if I can be honest, today's healthcare is really sick care. We only go and see a doctor when we don't feel well. Because we don't feel well, and therefore we go see a doctor and we take whatever pills or treatment that's prescribed. But in the Eastern medicine, we always believe prevention is better than cure. If we can prevent a disease from happening in the first place, then we do not need to suffer the symptoms or the pain. Now, why does that take discipline? It's just like exercise, right? If we feel good, what incentive do we have to exercise or to take preventive tests if we don't have the discipline? Now, we continue to wait for us to be sick, right? And this is almost like buying insurance. If you look at 30 years ago, we don't like to buy insurance because we don't feel the importance of having insurance until something devastating happened. But in the last 3 decades, that mindset has shifted because we have seen the importance of having ourselves insured in case something happens. It's the same with prevention, it's the same with preventive type of healthcare. Because we are doing something now so that we ourselves can benefit 10, 20 years down the road. That's why it takes discipline, because we are forward-looking.
Okay, I understand that. And so when it comes back to Mirxes and the technology that you use, and of course, I think the world has woken up to the opportunity that can give society, because many of the COVID vaccines were based on RNA technology. Could you explain a little bit more about the technology that you use at Mirxes, and how early can some of these cancers be detected?
Now, the silver lining of COVID is really the world has been educated on what RNA is or what PCR is. So you can imagine before COVID, any of our conversation with a partner or even a physician starts by explaining what RNA is. Today, we understand RNA is an important building block of our cells, of our body, and it plays an important role. And more importantly, we are actually able to harness the power of these RNA to detect diseases or to treat diseases. Now, specifically for us, we are utilizing this RNA as early signal in the blood to detect the presence of very small or early stage tumor. How can we do that? Now, if you look at a tumor cell, it's almost a spy. It's different from a virus, which is a foreign object in our body. So detecting cancer is essentially detect the very, very small difference between a spy and part of us. Now, we spent close to 20 years studying RNA, and in the last 10 years, with the advancement in detection technology, we are able to now see the very minute RNA signals present in our blood when there's literally a very, very small tumor. And because of the advance in technology, we're able to now have a much better resolution of these signals. Therefore, we're able to see cancer at early stage. And we are applying this at a blood test using PCR technologies. And we're able to do so again because the world post-COVID has seen tremendous increase in PCR testing capacity. So it's advancement in technology, it's better understanding of the biology, coupled with the building up of infrastructure that led us to where we are today.
So Mirxes actually detects very early somebody who has a disease as distinct from wider population genomics testing that perhaps identifies a probability that somebody might get something. So for any individual to get the best value out of Mirxes' current diagnostic capability, you have the very early stage cancer. It's not before you develop that.
This year marks the 20th anniversary of the completion of the first human genome, where for the first time we understood our DNA blueprint. So a lot of the DNA tests that's been invented over the last 2 decades really tell us whether we were born with a higher risk of developing cancer. But what it does not tell us is when or if that person actually develops the cancer. When we look at the RNA is a more dynamic reflection of the ongoing changes in our body. So DNA and RNA are actually complementary signals. DNA tells our risk, and RNA allows us to have a real-time monitoring of the disease state.
I think that's a fascinating and very important point there, that DNA gives us a more genetic predisposition, but RNA gives a current readout of how we're performing. And I think that's often lost in many people's understanding. Obviously not the specialists, but general population. There's a misunderstanding that genetics can tell you everything, but it's that mix between DNA and RNA that as you point out, is so powerful. Let me switch slightly to something that I'm fascinated with, and let me just try this out on you and get your reaction. So for many, many years, medicine, I think, has been a clinical science supported by data. And as we move forward with innovations such as those at Mirxes, I do see a world where medicine and healthcare is becoming a data science supported by clinicians. Now, many of my clients and friends who are clinicians don't quite like that phrase quite so much. But I'd love to get your perspective on how you see medicine evolving and data science and almost physicians becoming medical engineers supported by data and technology playing out as we go forwards.
I would say we have always been in the field of data science. Now, look at how medicine was developed, or any of the drugs or medical devices are approved. It's always evidence-based. Right? So we spend a decade easily to build the necessary data and the evidence before we are comfortable with the efficacy and the safety of a drug or device. So in the actual fact, it's always been data-driven. But what has changed in the last decade, especially in the last couple of years, is our ability to accumulate and to track real-time a lot more data. Now, when we look at a drug or a device, we used to look at things in a very fragmented manner. Right? At any one point, a patient taking a drug or being treated by a device, is he or she responding? Right? It's a very fragmented view of the outcome. But with the ability of whether it's wearable devices, whether it's digitization of our medical records, we're tracking our lifestyles, we now can look at a person, a disease more holistically, not in a segmented view, but we are taking this in a longitudinal manner. Now that brings an important advancement. We probably will be able to, instead of taking a population average approach to medicine, to now move towards a precise and more personalized manner. And that takes data, but it takes well-curated and well-tracked data. So there are still a lot of challenges, but personally I'm very excited on how the accumulation of big data can actually help us.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm equally as excited about the opportunity that sensors give us to really give that a very precise, individualized readout of how our bodies are performing or reacting to any treatment, so that our treatment plan, a dosage can be very fine-tuned and adjusted to sort us as individuals. Which brings me on to health experience. We see, of course, in many shapes of our lives, be it Netflix or Uber or Airbnb, that they're all focusing on not only what the company delivers, but the experience of how the hotel or the car ride or the film is delivered. So I'd love to get your perspectives on how healthcare systems, healthcare providers, how all those stakeholders in healthcare can move towards offering a more of an experience as well as highly efficacious and personalized treatment.
Why do I think experience is important, especially for preventive medicine? It's again back to what's the incentive of doing anything? Now, in today's healthcare or sick care, the incentive is to feel better. So it's a very clear incentive for the patient, and therefore he or she will act. Now, moving towards preventive healthcare, frankly, there's little incentive in terms of feeling better immediately. There isn't such an incentive. So we look at preventive healthcare as a highly consumerized journey. And because of that, how can we make a visit to a clinic, or how can we make a blood drawn more palatable to an individual? Because at the end of the day, poking ourselves with a needle is not the nicest experience. And because of that, we have to package this into a journey where someone in the future walks into not necessarily a clinic, but a health management center. Perhaps the scent, the visual, the sound need to give us a way to incentivize ourselves to visit again and again, and to actually understand why do we come here, and why are we running certain tests, and what does the test result show us, and how does it guide us. Actionability of a test becomes very important, and the whole journey doesn't start when someone visits the clinic. In fact, the journey starts at the individual's home. Why should I even go to a clinic? So we foresee this to be a highly consumerized industry.
I'm with you 100%, and I think actually in the diagnostic space, having better diagnostics and the ability to perhaps visualize how a person's well-being and body is actually working actually reduces sometimes the fear that people have in terms of going to a medical facility. So I think it's going to be really interesting going forwards how we as patients, we as consumers will start demanding and opting to choose certain organisations that offer a much better supportive valuable experience to us as patients and individuals. Which brings me also on to value-based healthcare. We hear that phrase a lot in the industry, and speaking to a group of clients last week, not only biopharma companies, medical device companies, but also payers and providers, there seems to be a disparity on how individual stakeholder groups actually agree on value, apart from the end result of a positive health outcome for the patient. So what would your advice be in terms of helping these stakeholder groups align on value?
I think there is the disparity, as you mentioned, right now, because we are not collectively designing a patient journey. We are all looking at an individual segment and argue which one of us can take the biggest share of this journey. But what we have not realized is if we are able to collectively build this, then the people we're targeting are no longer the patients or those that fall sick, but instead, we are looking at the entire population. So we should collectively grow the pie and grow the pie in a sustainable manner, which is then related to affordability of healthcare, instead of focusing on those who can pay.
That's a great point around focus on the patient journey. I think that's incredible. And actually, that also brings us sort of links back into the whole experience. A patient needs or wants a better experience from the beginning of their healthcare journey to the end. Linking to this value question, do you see a world in healthcare where payment by results, so payment will be given, or greater degrees of reimbursement will be given to medicines that work, and dare I say it, lesser degrees or perhaps no payment would be given to treatments that don't work? That's a very interesting conundrum, I think, and could perhaps help us in terms of the affordability question that you've mentioned a couple of times.
I believe so, and we're already starting to see that in some selected cases. Now, should a patient be treated and the therapy works, then the company gets paid. And if the therapy failed to achieve the results, then no payment is required. I think that's fair. And that will incentivize whether it's a drug company or device company to really focus and identify those patients that will benefit from the therapy. And this is important as we become more precise and personalized. None of us are born the same, and none of us live our lives the same way. And therefore, even the same disease, whether it's cancer or cardiovascular disease, warrants more individualized treatment. So if we can get the biology right, and if we can use big data to really pick and stratify patient population, we should be able to get there. Then it's actually a bigger incentive for us to find the right patient to treat with the right therapy.
100% agree with that. Coming back to Mirxes, how do you think Mirxes could scale twice as fast as it currently is scaling? I guess I'm really asking, what are the biggest hurdles to scaling such great RNA innovations so it's more accessible and also more affordable across the healthcare industry?
The biggest bottleneck we see is simply people. Now, and let me share that. The world is not short of problems to address. The world is not short of technologies, nor are we short of funding or actually the commitment to work together. But what we are really short of, especially in industries where we have to push the frontier, we have to push the boundary, is people who are willing to take that risk. So within the company, we have to continue to look out for talents who's willing to risk their career to push the boundary in science as well as in clinical implementation. At the same time, as we alluded to from earlier discussions, how do we incentivize our patients, or more accurately, individuals, to also take part in this preventive healthcare journey? It's a mindset change, whether it's within the company or to the people that will benefit. So that's the biggest bottleneck I see.
Okay, so that's maybe something for all of our listeners and viewers to really think about, is what can we do more, perhaps offering up ourselves to be tested or participating in the healthcare system. I understand that. Looking at the future, I mean, I'm a big passionate believer that healthcare will become more accessible, more affordable, new innovations will be accelerated, and perhaps that is just a pipe dream in terms of, you know, the near term, because there are so many barriers as you indicate. But let's be optimistic. And what do you personally feel as most exciting about the healthcare industry and the changes that you think are going to happen at scale in the next 24 months?
Wow. I think overall...
I know it's a big question.
I know. I think overall we are looking at really 3 A's: accuracy, accessibility, and actionability in healthcare, in medicine. Again, coming back to the human genome, it costed the world $2.7 billion to sequence the first human genome, and that took us 13 years. Today, we can do so in 4 days, under $300. So I think accessibility to the most advanced medical technology will happen in the next 24 months. The question is, are we ready to fully utilize and harness the power of these technologies? And I think COVID is a great example. Before COVID, mRNA vaccine has been around for almost 2 decades. We didn't take the opportunity to harness. But if the world come together and decided to utilize something, we can change the world within 24 months. So whether that's earlier detection of cancer or utilizing mRNA vaccine for not only COVID, perhaps cancer or cardiovascular diseases, I'm excited of what we can do with RNA technologies in the next 24 months.
That's brilliant. I can feel your excitement. And I think that this whole dynamic of mixing DNA with mRNA technologies, I think is really remarkable. And something I often talk a lot about is unlocking the power within data to drive a personalized health experience. And I think that if we as individuals then actually take that upon ourselves, as we're an important part to play in this whole healthcare journey, then I think we will have a much better probability of getting to realization some of the factors that you've just mentioned. And Dr. Lihan, let me close by asking you, you've been incredibly successful in the formation of Mirxes, and notwithstanding COVID and the world being alerted to mRNA technologies, which of course has been helpful for us in healthcare to implement the use at greater proportions of scale. But turning back to your 25-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself back then in terms of seizing the opportunity in healthcare in front of you, as was then?
I will tell my 25-year-old self 2 things. Be aggressive and be patient at the same time. Why do I say that? Now, 15 years ago, we are at the dawn of RNA technologies. There are many things that we could have addressed should we have decided to be more aggressive, should the world have put in more resources to look at RNA instead of focusing very much on DNA. But at the same time, when RNA technology really started to make impact in healthcare, that's a combination of factors, really a disease indication that warrants RNA technology to go in, the reduction in costs, as well as the public awareness. So I think this will be true for the future as well. We have to be aggressive in pushing the boundary of technology and science, but we also have to be, at the same time, be patient to make sure the various stakeholders in the ecosystem come on board to address a collective unmet need.
Dr. Lihan, thank you very much. Let's be bold, let's be optimistic, and congratulations on the success of Mirxes to date. And I very much look forward to following the success of mRNA technologies and the importance of mRNA technologies in the future diagnostic ability of healthcare. So thank you very much for speaking to us today.
Thank you for having me.